Hello students, today we'll be starting off our SAT math section. Well, as usual, let's go over the question types and how much time you need to devote to them. Of course, we have the non-calculator section, which you get 20 questions to do within 25 minutes. They're the most straightforward out of all the questions in my opinion. You should devote around 1 minute to each question, although you should get a time allocation of maybe 1 minute and maybe 20 seconds. Don't bet on it, only do a 1 minute question. If you cannot solve a question within that time period, skip it and come back to it later. The reason is that some of the questions, the SAT doesn't do their difficulty scaling that well. So you might get probably like 16 really easy questions and then maybe get 2 or 3 really difficult questions that you do not get. So what is it worth more? You know, spend 5 minutes on one question, get that 1 point, or maybe spend the 5 minutes on the other 3 questions and not run out of time and get the 3 points, right? As I can said, all these questions are worth the same amount. So do 1 minute question. If you can't finish a question within that time period, skip it. It's better for your points, it's better for your mental health too, make you less stressed. Same case with a 55 minutes section in which you have 38 questions along with your calculator. And quick tip with these calculator questions, you should usually, you should get something. Don't get a really small, cheap calculator. Chances are if you're taking the SAT math, your school probably requires you to get one of the TI-83 or 84s. Get them, much bigger screen. You can see your equations line by line so that you don't forget what you have been doing. You can track your steps. As we go along and then do the problems later on, I'll show you exactly how that will be helpful, but that's for later. And usually the same case with a 25-minute question, the strategy too. Spend around 1 minute a question. If you can't solve it, just move on, come back to it later if you have time, right? And this section is slightly strange in the fact that it has 8 questions that are filling the blank. And these are not that much harder than the other questions that do not need the filling in blank. But you need to pay attention to how you're filling in the actual, they give you little 4 boxes. They need to both fill in your answer in the written form and also do the answers in the bubble form. And then these are some tips to help you do that, the first couple ones. First of all, never reduce your fractions. That's a really good tip I was looking through the book and found. If you reduce your fraction, it may make it more difficult for you to solve the problem as you go along. We'll practice this as we go along. And also, there's another extra step that you can mess up on. As we can say, the more steps you put in a problem, the more likely you'll mess up, right? And then the second one has specific to do with the 8 questions in which you have to fill in the blank. Mixed fractions is not a good thing. Do not put a mixed fraction. For example, you have, say, 3 and 1/2. If you're bubbling 3 and then put 1/2, it'll sound like you're bubbling 31/2, which is, of course, that's equal to maybe like 15.5. We don't want that. Convert all your mixed fractions to the simplified fractions, in which case 3.5, you'll change that to maybe 7/3, right? If you do not do this, this is not a suggestion. If you don't do this, you will get the problem wrong. And then, of course, another strange thing that you have to pay attention to is that the SAT don't want you to put 0.44, for example, if you're bubbling in, if you're filling the free response sections, because they don't even have a 0 in the first column. If you see that, don't freak out. Know that they're not saying that the answer is not possible with 0 point something. Just put point, for example, 444 instead, something like that, because they want you again to be more accurate, and it's a waste of time to write a 0 in the beginning if you already have a decimal point. And then the next step is that there's no penalties in the new SAT, all right? A long time ago there is, but you don't need to worry about that nowadays. So if you have 1 minute left and have 5 or 6 questions at the end, guess, it doesn't matter. Even if you have fill in the blank, just fill in something. You never know the chance of you getting that right. That's why I recommend bring a watch with you, especially in the math sections, because it's so easy. You have to allocate the time so straightforward and stuff like that. Again, don't bring a digital one, right? And next we have to deal with actually a couple strategies. This book gives you a bunch of whole different strategies, but in my opinion, most of these are just gonna be cumbersome and weigh you down when you're actually doing the problems, all right? For example, some of the ones that I found are actually useful is that, of course, draw diagrams whenever you can. Reason is, it's much easier to keep track of your work. We'll demonstrate that later on. For example, if you draw a diagram like this, and then you somehow get confused while you're doing the problem, you can go back and look at it, you're like, oh, this side is 3, this side is 4, I still got it. You don't have to go through the whole question and do it again. So draw diagrams whenever you can. Again, do not make your diagrams fancy. Keep it as simple as you can. I'm not a great artist, just sketch something out, right? The whole point of a diagram is to keep you from getting confused and to keep you visualize the whole thing. So keep it simple, never make it complicated. You're wasting your time if you're making it complicated. And again, a lot of the SAT questions, I would say probably like 50, 60, maybe even 70% of them, you can solve using equations. Some of them ask for equations in answer. So right away, even before you actually start doing the problem, when you're reading the question and then you see them talking about different variables and what they are, start writing down the equations, right? Don't waste your time reading a second time. Just start writing down equations as fast as you can. Most of these problems can be solved using them. And then the last one is that after you finish all the problem, after your minute of like frantically scrambling and getting your answer down, look at your answer and ask yourself, does it make sense? You know, if they're asking about how much cargo a truck can carry, and you come out with an answer that's like 53 tons, obviously that is not going to be correct. SAT isn't like some of the practice problems you've been doing from the other books. They will keep all their questions to sensical realms, right? They wouldn't have something ridiculous in most cases. Actually, I haven't seen a single one that's ridiculously high in your answers. So after you finish your answer, check to see if it makes sense, especially in the free response sections that they don't have the ABCDs, right? Check to see if, you know, a person carrying 53 watermelons on their back makes any sense. Check to see if like 8,000 volts in electrical current like makes sense, something like that. Just keep that in mind, the final check. And then, yeah, the most important tip is just to do not spend over a minute on a single question. And then pay attention to your final answer and draw the diagonal equations. That's pretty much it. Really simple section in this. Again, SAT Math, this is probably the best section to practice your questions on. The more practice you get, the faster it will become. And based on time limits, time is probably your number one priority. Thank you, and then we'll practice more of these in our next video in the actual practice tests.